Thank you. Yeah, so thank you for this opportunity. And I will just start off saying a little bit about what I do, just to set some context. So urban planning as a field is about designing cities. But cities are just one part of human settlement. So human settlements are going back to like thousands of years. And there is a way that human beings have learned to inhabit the land, and it has been always done in a way where nature is an ally. And water is a central theme. If you look at any early civilizations, any ancient cities, they're always built on the banks of a river or at the coast. So water has been a very significant part of the human evolution. And so what I do is to work with communities, with authorities, government authorities, with other technical experts, to work with nature-based systems or nature-allied systems, where we use natural systems as a means to solve our problems, to cater to our needs, and live in a system of abundance, not in the scarcity mindset. Because and there is a way, and that's what is the basis of what I want to convey today, that there is a way. It is not one or the other. We don't have to use up every last drop of natural resource just for living a good life. We can still live a great life and still have systems. Yeah, so today we will be speaking about rainwater management and ground recharge. And so I'll just start off with what is the purpose of rainwater management. So we here in Goa and anywhere along the Western Ghats, we've understood what abundance of water means. Up until 20, 30 years ago, water was always an abundant resource, and we've seen a very rapid decline in the amount of water. And it's not just the reasons are not just incidental. It's just not that, oh, these things happen. It is a result of the way we have planned our human settlements. And one of the chief things is that in a monsoon-fed region, we've forgotten to account, or we've on purpose stopped accounting for the amount of water that comes in and how to use it. So on a general overarching level, the purpose of rainwater management is to manage the flow and impact of rainwater at the land surface level. So as soon as the water from rain hits the land, that's the point at which we need to start managing it. And we want to, this provides for all the water for our needs, and the water for the needs of all the other beings in our system. We're not the only beings, right? So this system needs to account for other beings, and it maintains the ecosystemic balance of the region. It also ensures the protection of the hydrological system. It protects us from flood and other forms of resilience, and it also protects the topsoil, and this will come to in a bit. And it maintains the ecosystemic balance of the region, which is really critical. I'll just start with an overarching level of hydrology, right? So if we look at, this is an image, which is just sort of an infographic. Oh, sorry. And I want to point out to say that, you know, like if we look at the Western Ghats to the Arabian Sea belt, which is pretty much, I mean, Goa, parts of Karnataka, Kerala, and of course Maharashtra and Gujarat, but as the mountains get higher, this becomes more pronounced. But the Western Ghats, if we take this as that, and the hydrological system, which is very related to the topographical system, is mainly divided into 3 zones. So we start with the higher zone, which is the headwaters, and this basically is where the water systems originate. So this would be very high elevation, steep slopes, and here you'll see a lot of waterfalls, rapids, and streams. And sometimes these streams are only visible during the rainy season. So when the monsoons come, streams start appearing, and during the dry season, these will not look like streams. And this is important because we need to know that these areas are springs and streams. The water as you come to the transfer zone, the mountains get a little less steep. Water starts coming together, various streams and smaller rivulets come and start forming the larger parts of the river. The river itself takes form. And the river starts to meander, whereas in the headwater zone, the rivers are quite, it's not so much of a strong water body, singular water body. And then through the transfer zone, it comes to the depositional zone just before it joins the sea. And here the river slows down, it becomes wide, and it starts meandering. And it's really important to understand that on either side of the river and where the river meanders, nature has accounted that during the heavy monsoon season or the rainy season, these rivers will expand. And so you see floodplains, you see low-lying areas, and often even below sea level areas. This is where the river deposits a lot of silt. And as a result, it's very fertile soil. And then it starts again splitting up before it joins into distributaries, before it joins the sea. And the mouth of the river is again a very critical ecosystem. So that's at a conceptual level, and this is just from Google, and I wanted to point that, I don't know if you can see, but these are the mountain ranges, and you can see these small sort of, obviously we can't see the spring at this level, but these kind of lakes or natural reservoirs are formed higher up in the mountains, which overflow into the rivers. And as we come down, so this is the Western Ghats. These are sort of the transfer zones where the hills are a bit more gentle. And then the river starts meandering, and as you can see, as it comes closer to the edge, it starts splitting up again. And just as a side note, you also see how human settlement has affected. All the brown patches are cities and towns, and you can also really clearly see how along the banks it's quite concentrated, which is kind of counterintuitive when it's that close, but it also is this natural tendency we have as human beings that that being next to water is important for our own civilization. And so now this is again an infographic, and this is just to show what a typical sort of a hydrological system is. So the bottommost layer is the bedrock, and then we have the fractured zone here, which is also very hard rock. But there are these sort of vacuums in between which fills up with water, and these are deep aquifers. And then we have the unconfined shallow aquifers, on top of which there is topsoil. This is the topsoil. And above that is what we see as the top surface, right? So these kind of water bodies, like lakes, are considered surface water bodies. And the unconfined shallow aquifer is basically divided from the surface by by topsoil and some amount of very soft rock sometimes. And underneath this is the unconfined shallow aquifer. So when we use wells, for example, we are tapping into the unconfined shallow aquifers. However, when we do bore wells, we go into the deep aquifer zone, and that's not desirable. So actually the primary source of water is rain, and then what is considered a secondary source are the surface water resources like lakes and ponds and streams. And then there are groundwater resources, which are the unconfined aquifers and the deep aquifers. So what is really important here is, what is really important here is that this water is the most, the lake water, the rainwater, if we can collect some of that, and the unconfined shallow aquifers are the most sort of the best sources of water for human consumption. And why is that? A, it is easy to use, easy to refill. But also, as the water comes deeper into the soil, it starts dissolving more and more of the minerals, and that's what we know as hard water. So hard water is not really good for our health. But what is happening today, as we all know, is that in many places in the country or in the world, these open wells are not enough. We've sucked out our water because we're using water without a care. And then when the unconfined aquifer runs out, we start going deeper and deeper. And in a place like Goa, often what is also happening is when people already have a mindset that the borewell is the better source. And this is completely wrong, but it's just that people are not aware, have not been used to using well water. So there is so we see this in a lot of the huge apartments and luxury villas coming up, that there's a default tendency to be like, let's just dig a borewell. Now what happens when you dig a borewell is that it starts taking this water out, and as this water gets emptied, it starts drawing this water down. So even if the unconfined aquifer is full, when people start digging borewells, the wells start emptying. And that's something that we're facing in Goa today. So coming back to the fact that borewells at a fundamental level is problematic. But, and on another note, these kind of recharge surfaces and recharge wells allow us to recharge the unconfined aquifer. Now, two things to note: we must never recharge directly into the open well, or into, I've seen people even recharge directly into the bore well. Now, this we mustn't do basically for 2-3 reasons. One, the soil pollution and the other chemicals that are existing, it should not go in and pollute these levels. But even if we are leading a very natural, idealistic life, the pathogens that are there on the surface of the earth don't exist here. So why just directly dumping water into a bore well? We are creating an ecosystemic imbalance. So therefore we do these kind of surface systems which filter naturally through the soil, go into these recharge wells, filter through all the layers and go into the shallow unconfined aquifers. Then through nature's filtration system, it goes into the deep aquifers. And just the last note, I just wanted to point out that topsoil is the soil that is really precious to us. It basically takes thousands of years, the natural topsoil. There are ways to do it in shorter time because we have to, but this topsoil is rich in organic matter. It is rich in life form, and that's what allows it to support life. So it's very important that we are able to preserve the topsoil. In many of our, what we see today is that that's why even trees are important. Trees, grasslands, natural flora systems protect and hold the topsoil together. So when we say don't cut a tree without thinking about it, is also that it's not just about the tree giving oxygen, right? The tree is holding the soil together. The roots are interconnected. So maybe this tree and this tree, their roots are touching either directly or indirectly, and there's a massive network of information and natural flows that are happening at the topsoil level, including fungi and all sorts of microbes. And so when we cut down this tree, and often now we're seeing in Goa and many other, what is happening in Goa is not just a Goa problem, it's happening everywhere across the Western Ghats and 100% everywhere in the country as well. Nowadays, we see that trees are being cut, and then you see the entire root being taken out. I mean, we just had this big struggle in Sholem where overnight they cut the trees, and the next thing you know, they've dug out these huge roots. So then you are making this entire process even faster. So otherwise, if you cut a tree and you let the root rots over time and gives way to organic matter, and then other things can come up there. But the way, and I've even, of course, seen incidents where they fill it up with concrete. So these kind of things are extremely harmful for the entire stability of the topsoil. And once the deep aquifers start emptying, and then the shallow obviously is also empty, and then the topsoil is eroded, basically we are living on very fragile rock. So imagine all of this being just vacuums and multiple such borewells. So this entire, sort of the structural integrity of this rock is gone if there are multiple such borewells. And then this is also empty. You will start seeing that these rocks will start collapsing. And we're also then putting huge buildings on the surface, and the foundations are also going through this. So we are essentially creating a system that is going to collapse on itself and on us. So I just wanted to take a second and just sit in the idea of rain, right? Rain is, for many of us who grew up in these parts, rain is a blessing. Rain is something to celebrate. And that's how I remember growing up, and that's how I feel most of you have as well. But this is not the case today. Rain is something that people are fearing, either because they're not familiar with it, or because in the last few years we've seen so many negative effects of climate and rain and all of these ecological destruction that we tend to blame it on rain. But rain is a purest source of water that we have naturally available. Nature distills this water source and it sends it to us. And it is the primary source of water for the entire hydrological cycle of the planet, because it balances water systems between the oceans and land water systems. So the Amazon River drying up today will affect our rivers and vice versa. So it's a global problem. It feeds all the secondary sources, and it's the relatively the softest water source we have. And for everyone who grew up in the western coast of India and who live here, the monsoon is a very specific event, and it has a very specific sound. And it's a big part of the way we approach life. The monsoon rain sounds different from any other type of rain. And it's when you think of it, it's the entire planet coming together to create this monsoon, which is linked to the Himalayas, the Indian subcontinent, and the Western Ghats. So any of the Himalayan system being eroded will also affect the monsoons. And if we don't have the Western Ghats, like the quarrying and the mining in the Western Ghats disappearing, the monsoon will not shed its water here. The winds will just take the rain and go inside, and then we will have more droughts and less rain here. And also there will be heavy rains in areas that are not in this climate era meant to have that much rain. So as a result of this balance, these are the two things we see. We see massive flooding during monsoon, and we see droughts during summer. So these are both symptoms, these are not problems. And nature-based water management systems address both of them at the same time. These are just some images which I'm sure we've all seen multiple times before. This is a recent Wayanad disaster. And this is not a natural water body that used to exist. This is the immediate after. These are actually rescue efforts going on. So this is in the immediate aftermath of the landslide, and the amount of water and rock and topsoil and mud that has come through. This is an image from Goa. This is what happens every time we have 10 minutes rain now. This is the line of water tankers that Nilankur was referring to, which again is become a familiar sight. If we're not seeing the line of them, we're seeing one each every 10 seconds as a water tanker racing past our roads. And it seems mind-boggling, considering the kind of monsoon we're having. Who requires water tankers, and where is this water coming from, right? But people have just gotten so used to not asking these questions. Why do we need a water tanker to supply water, charging very high rates? So for the rich, maybe a 3,000 rupee month water bill is nothing, but it is a significant amount of money for most people in our country, and water cannot be privatized. Water is our basic right. So this is an interesting image. It is a field, and yes, the rice fields and low-lying fields are meant to fill up with water. But I put this image here because when we have polluted water sources coming in, it deposits very harsh chemicals into the fields, and then the field becomes unusable or toxic. And this is again an interesting image, which shows this dry, cracked ground, which is extreme, it's a symptom of extreme water stress, right next to a water body, which shows that the soil is not holding any water together. Coming back to the fact that this is because topsoil has been completely eroded as a result of surface flora systems eroding. I just want to take a minute and pause here and let all of you sort of take a look at the image, the two images, not so much what is written, but I just want to give a few seconds to just observe this. So coming to the problem. So now when we look at such a, this is actually, this is not in Goa, it is in the Western Ghats, it's actually from Kerala. But when you look at such an image, it looks green, it looks beautiful. This is where resorts are, this is where we want to go for holidays. It looks like there's no problem, there's water, there's green. But this is a very eroded system and it is on its way to collapse. And why is that? Because this could be a natural forest and the rest of it is all eroded. Most of these are tea estates. Tea estates are an alien species which were brought in mostly in this part of the Western Ghats by the British, where they literally bolded thousands, tens and tens of thousands of acres of forest and planted this sun-loving species. So these are just shrubs. And then you see these kind of pathways, some of them cutting across. You see all the brown patches, all of them are disruptions. And when we put a pathway like this, not to say we can't have a pathway, but when we put such a pathway, we need to be really aware of how is it affecting the water system. Because as I was showing from the hydrological system image, there are springs that are very small and tiny, and these are the top of the Western Ghats, right? So you don't see them, and you can easily cut across them. But then you disrupt the whole system. And when you disrupt this at this level, and actually when you're looking at this image, you're looking at multiple mountains. So the entire, there would have been hundreds of, or if not more, springs over here which have been destroyed as a result of building such a road. And then on top of that, there's no more native vegetation, and God knows what chemicals they're putting into this. And this is an example of one of those high-level lakes where water fills in here from these rivulets, and from here it flows into the next stream that goes and feeds into the larger and larger streams until it starts forming the river. So if you put chemicals here, it goes and it pollutes the water at the source. And now the image on this image is an extreme situation. This is a mine. So when people are fighting, when environmental activists and tribals are opposing mines, it's because before you know it, this is what happens. And this area, which was once a diverse forest where animals and people were living in abundance, now it's just a aftermath of what is GDP. I mean, nobody benefits from this except the owner of the mine company, not even the people for whom the jobs are created, because this is also toxic. We've also released all sorts of gases, all sorts of minerals which should not be in the atmosphere, and dust and things when you do this. And people in these areas, as you know, will have all sorts of respiratory, skin, and of course more serious illnesses like cancer as well. Now the problem is, if we have to divide the problem into 3 or 4 categories, it's a disturbance of landform, which is all of these things. It's a disruption of the water system, which is again a related system. And another thing, which is excessive and unnatural impermeability of surfaces. We've all seen these things where huge apartments are coming up or newer constructions are coming up, and people come with this idea where they don't want to tolerate even a blade of grass because it's hard to maintain, because it has insects, and now we've come to a point where every other natural being is not an ally, is an enemy in fact. So you see large areas, and this is completely everywhere in Goa today, large acres and acres of area where there isn't even one spot where water can permeate into the ground. It's all concrete surfaces. So then there's no water going into the ground either. And then on top of that, you're extracting water for all sorts of, with so much water for even swimming pools and for agriculture, which is unsustainable forms of agriculture, etc. So now we get to how and what can we do. So this at the overarching level, what is a stormwater management strategy? You have to protect, slow, hold, and flow. And this should be our thought for every part of the water system, which is also part of the larger system. So this is sort of like a image to show what a city can be. So, we often have this conversation where, you can't live. Are we supposed to not live in the comfort that we're used to? Yes, you can live in the comfort that you're used to. But there are things that you need to do to ensure that the water system and the natural system is left intact. So the first thing, protect the water source from pollution, but also protect the natural system, because as humans, when we live, there will be some level of pollution, even if we exercise the utmost care. But there are ways to filter and protect. So the natural system must be protected from the human system through other natural systems. And then slow. As soon as the water hits the ground, it needs to flow as slowly as possible without flooding. And then we need to have spaces that are designated for water to be held so that it can percolate. And then finally it flows, joins the river, joins the sea. So once it goes into the sea, again it becomes unusable for human consumption. So the intention is to capture the maximum amount of water as close to the source of it falling as possible. And this is, another image from Goa. It's from Shiolam actually. Just to say that none of this is in replacing natural systems. We still need to protect the fields, the wetlands, the riverbanks, the natural water bodies, large and small, the ones we see easily and the ones we don't. And leaving as much of it as undisturbed is desirable, and if we have to disturb, to do it very strategically. This is an example, again, showing what is a human nature system. So these are actually rice fields. To say that rice fields were done in low-lying areas because it was a symbiotic relationship with nature. In monsoon, this filled up with water naturally, and then you used it, and then it almost fills up to the top. And in case of flood, it just protects, these areas protect the human habitats from flooding as well. So I will just now present sort of these very, I won't get into the over details, but just to show the possibility of what we can do at a conceptual level. What we can do to create, we can integrate it to our existing system even in its current eroded state, but we can also design future systems with this in mind. So there's a concept called bioswales, which I'm sure many of you know, and the term is quite new, most likely, but the system is not. This is the system of our ancestors. This is how indigenous communities used to protect and work with land. So in my work, we really use the indigenous system as the base because there's so much brilliance in it, and there are a lot of artificial interferences that destroyed this system. So, but at the same time, maybe things have changed, life has moved on, so we might have to contemporize it a little bit. So that's sort of the work that we intervene. So earlier we had a lot less human population and a lot more land, like 2,000 years ago, right? But now we have a higher population, so everybody does require basic houses and amenities. So there are ways to, instead of having larger swales, there are ways to make smaller swales and recharge pits. So that is sort of the contemporization work that we do, and can we integrate some newer materials with older systems, and how do we make that more practical? So this is an example of a road, and then a footpath, and we have a bioswale, and the bioswale is then to an interconnected network of retention ponds and rain gardens. So that is to say, all the water on the road will go into the bioswale. Bioswale will still have a slope of some level, so the water will flow, but if we have excessive rainfall, it overflows and goes into all of these pits, and it all sinks into the ground. Now this is nature's system, but we are just reintegrating it into human settlement. And this is sort of like a technical section, just to say, like, the camber of the road, which is the slope, is important, and beneath the footpath you send it into this bioswale, and the actual swale is this deep, but you fill it up, and I will get to that later. We fill it up with a strategic way of using stone and other materials, and then plant on top of it, so that in dry season it's not like a deep pit you fall into. It looks beautiful. Native plants can grow there. It supports biodiversity. It adds to the beauty, the shade. It's a very natural and useful system. But we pick species that are either water resistant or seasonal. So that means that when water fills up, this becomes a place to hold water, and water also recharges into the pit. So this is not this is not a the IRC, the Indian Roads Congress, has a guidebook on how these things are done. So when and I'm saying this particular fact because a lot of us work with governments and communities, and it's often looked at as, are you coming up with some fantasy idea? But it's not. I mean, the government and technical bodies across the country have already recognized this. There is a guidebook that we can use and adapt it to our local system. And the more important thing here is also this, that at this place beneath it, we put a perforated pipe. So in case there's a flood and all of this starts overflowing, because it's perforated, it naturally takes the water, and then you can quickly get it into the sea as well. And this particular, just to say, today's rainwater management system in roads are to put these concrete stormwater drains, bigger and bigger and bigger ones, which take the water and in seconds it reaches the sea. And that means we don't get any usage out of that water. So this is the alternative to that, which does the same thing in more efficiently. So these are just some, just to show that it's possible to do it on a sloped piece of land, if it's a very large piece of land and you want larger bodies, or in short sites that we do it as either a rectangular pit or a shallow swale. And what happens when it fills up with water? So it's always in this sort of a system, and now this becomes like a sunken garden. So it's not like a pit where garbage is thrown, but rather it's usable. And in monsoon it fills up with water. Now this is what can be done at an independent bungalow or villa or whatever it is stage. So this is how the current global aspirations of an independent house and a lawn teach us to do. As quickly as possible, let all the water through your paved surfaces and gutters leave the road, and it's not our problem, then it's the government's problem, and then it leaves the road, and who cares what happens to it. So this is the alternate system where we collect every drop of water from the roof, have it in strategic locations. We have these retention pits, rain gardens and things which are similar to the fact that those other sections I showed, where in dry season it becomes like gardens and in wet season it becomes like ponds, and it continuously keeps flowing. So it's not like these are dead zones that are mosquito population havens. And trees are super important because it's the trees that prevent the erosion of the topsoil. So as the water is leaving like this, it is these tree roots that hold on to the topsoil erosion, and then you'll often find that these areas are extremely fertile to grow things. Secondly, the roots of the trees also activate taking the water deeper into the ground quicker. So trees are very important in this system. Now campuses, when I'm just using the term campuses, it can be an apartment complex, a university, any large campus. And again, the first image shows what happens today. And any road, you see any road that is nowadays flooding really quickly, it's probably because on either side of the road there are these huge complexes. And this could be like, say, 3 acres of land, and all the water quickly reaches the road, and then it forms these large puddles on the road. Like, we've just heard of Bangalore and its water crisis, right, in this year. Most of the city roads in Bangalore are flooding for this precise reason. It's because these apartment complexes, like for example, I don't know if you're familiar with Bangalore, but for who is, Richmond Road, for example, it goes into like, it's become a dangerous spot because the water is also flowing really fast on the road. It's just pure and simple, all the apartments throwing their water onto the road. And then basements get flooded, so it's not even like they escape from their own actions, but it's just the systems that are mutually failing. So this is an alternative for that, which is, I want to stress that it is possible to reintegrate it now. Even if it's built, if it's 10 years old, it doesn't matter. You can reintegrate this with minimal cost, with minimal input, and solve this problem. And the goal is, let's keep all the water on our sites. Let's not, because water is precious. How do we get the maximum water to reach the aquifers? So these just to quickly take you through, it's basically a system of slopes that you do very strategically, deciding which are the dry areas, which are the wet areas. from the dry areas, the water quickly drain into the areas designated for water, and then you again have larger places where water can stay for a bit and percolate, and then it's a completely interconnected system which flows into one another. And with those perforated pipes, so in case of flood, the whole system works together and the water can leave as quickly as possible. But the maximum water will be recharged. So this is basically called a system of bioswales, yeah. Now I just want to take, so this is just a detailed example of what a recharge pit looks like, because often I'm faced with a question, okay, so what do we do now? What can we do now? If we are building a new house, we already have a new house, we live in an apartment, we are involved in various institutions, government, non-government. In every site, this can easily be integrated. And as you can see, it is not an infrastructure heavy situation, so it's not going to cost you the money. We've been led to believe that the more expensive something is, the better the solution is. But this is a low financial investment solution, which is far more effective than anything else. So again, it's just a detailed image of what I showed before. There's a slight slope and a shallow. And then you have the top layers, which is loose soil. And you can have varying layers of loose soil, very loose to slightly thicker soil. And this is actually essentially topsoil. And even when you may put some soil to start with, but as you start growing things and, whenever things soil gets eroded, it gets put here. So that means that this becomes very rich topsoil really quickly. And these make sure that we plant water-friendly indigenous species. That's critical, because then it can support insect, reptile, bird populations. This is a coconut coir mat. We can also put a mesh of sorts. Any form of a surface that makes sure that all the soil is not going into, because the idea is to go from very large pieces to smaller pieces to smaller pieces, and then topsoil. So we don't want all of this to come and block the whole thing. So that's why we do it like this. Make sure the edges are, we use loose rock to sort of ram it in. It's called soling. And from here, the water comes here and it percolates, it naturally filters and goes into it. And especially when the roof drainage points come down, it could come down directly into a point like this before it starts having overflow surfaces. Before I end, I just want to show these images. All of these images were taken, I think, this week that went by. We thought the monsoon had ended and there was one day of heavy rainfall. This is after just 3 hours of rainfall. After about 2 weeks of no rainfall, everything had dried up. This is just after 2 hours. This is the Marna Road. See how much it is flooded. This is all Marna Road, how quickly it has flooded. Now this is a construction site. As you can see, immense amount of topsoil is being eroded. Whenever you see this kind of water, which is brown in color, it's topsoil. So it's a moment, literally, for us to mourn, because this topsoil takes years and years of hard work by us to make it, and for nature, far more years worth of intelligence is lost in this soil. So, and this is an easily solvable solution. Now, this particular site, which is most likely some kind of apartment coming up, can put in the rainwater management systems and make sure that this water is not coming out, neither is the topsoil. And similarly, the road systems were also managing the water, then this again wouldn't happen. And this is the Shiolum River. In just 2 hours, this is entirely brown like this in 2 hours because of the amount of topsoil that has entered this water. So I just actually wanted us to see how real this problem is and how easy the solution is, because all it takes is a little bit of will and a little bit of care and a little bit of work to find out what to do. And I also just want to say that, just to go back, we don't need to buy rock and things for this. I mean, we don't create a problem by doing more quarrying. No, this can be like loose rock that you can just find on your own land. If there's some laterite is commonly used as a construction material, so like broken pieces of laterite, coconut shell, fiber, like the top layers can have, instead of the coconut mat, you can just layer it with coconut fiber, like a thick layer. So there's many ways we can innovate and do this. The idea is not to take more resources from nature, for sure. Yeah, I just wanted to conclude by saying that these are our goals. And this is what we achieve if we do this. Flood control. So during flood, human communities are far safer, and so are all natural systems. Natural systems know how to take care of it, but because of human intervention, even natural systems are affected every time there's a flood. This is cost effective, so we don't need to be sucked into the money argument. It's the powerful measure to control soil erosion. It prevents, it facilitates aquifer recharge, both the shallow and the deep aquifers. And it's a powerful tool for ecosystem conservation. Yeah, and so I'm done. And I just wanted to say that certain things, there's certain technical things need to be considered. So just as disclaimers, slopes, runoff volumes and speeds have to be calculated in order to do this effectively. Not all swales can be just standard width. So if we are working with a panchayat and if they do standard width, that is something to talk about. We have to calculate the rainwater runoff and accordingly do the width and the depth of the swale. And wetland and field areas as well as other natural systems are extremely important, and none of this can come at the cost of that. It's not about replacing this with that. And yes, that's done.